The alarm on my scout ship screamed before I even understood what it meant. Red light filled the narrow cabin, and my hands froze over the controls. I was 300 units away from a line on the star chart that every pilot in the Corvain fleet had been trained never to cross. I had crossed it, not on purpose. A broken engine coil had pushed me off course during a routine patrol, and now my navigation system was telling me I was floating inside the edge of human territory. I am Elu Vantor, a scout of the Corvain Assembly, and until that moment, I had never taken the warnings about humans seriously. I had heard the stories like everyone else. I had seen the maps with the wide empty circle drawn around their systems, a circle that no fleet, no trade convoy, and no scavenger ship dared to enter. I had always assumed it was superstition. Older pilots loved to tell young ones frightening tales to keep them cautious. I thought humans were simply another species, perhaps stronger than most, perhaps better armed, but still just another species. Sitting there with my engine failing and my ship drifting past the invisible boundary, I did not feel like laughing at old stories anymore. I tried to restart my engine. Nothing responded. My hands were shaking, and I told myself it was only the cold air leaking from a damaged vent, not fear. I checked my scanners for any nearby vessels. Empty space stretched in every direction, silent and still, the kind of stillness that makes your instincts crawl even when your eyes see nothing wrong. Then a signal came through, calm and clear, in a language my translator understood without delay. Unknown vessel, you have entered a restricted boundary. Please respond. The voice was steady, almost gentle. It did not sound like a warning from a predator. It sounded like someone checking on a neighbor. I answered quickly, my voice higher than I wanted it to be. This is Scout Vessel Corvain 19. I have suffered engine failure. I did not intend to cross into your space. I request permission to repair my ship and leave immediately. There was a pause, just long enough for my mind to imagine every terrible outcome my culture had ever whispered about. Received, Corvain 19. Hold your position. Assistance is on the way. Assistance. Not a warning shot, not a demand for surrender, just assistance, offered so easily that it confused me more than any threat could have. Within minutes, a single small vessel approached, marked with human symbols I did not recognize. It moved with no aggression, no defensive formation, no show of force. A woman's voice greeted me once the ships were close enough for a direct link. Hello there, I'm Claire. Looks like your coil housing cracked. Happens more than you'd think out here. We'll get you sorted. I remember staring at my own reflection in the dark screen, trying to understand why my hands were still trembling, even though nothing threatening had happened. Claire's ship extended a small robotic arm, gently guiding mine into a stabilizing field, the kind used for safety, not capture. Her tone remained friendly the entire time, as if towing a frightened alien back from a restricted boundary was simply another ordinary task in her day. While her ship worked on stabilizing mine, I found myself asking a question I had never dared ask a human directly. Why do so few travel near this boundary? Even in your own transmissions I hear caution, but never explanation. There was a brief silence, and then Claire laughed, not unkindly. Guess nobody ever told you the full story, huh? It's a long one. Might be easier if you just talk to someone back at the station once you're patched up. I did not know it then, but that simple offer would change the course of my life. I was still shaken, still confused, still trying to convince myself that nothing dangerous had happened, when Claire's ship pulled mine gently toward a nearby human outpost. The structure came into view slowly, wide and quiet, orbiting a small moon with steady lights blinking along its hull. As I approached, my scanners picked up faint readings from deep within the station, something that made my instruments flicker for half a second before settling again. I told myself it was interference. I told myself it was nothing important. Docking took only a few minutes. Claire's voice guided me through each step with patience, and when my ship finally settled into the bay, I sat frozen for a moment, unsure whether I should feel relieved or afraid. A door opened, and Claire stepped inside my cockpit view, a young woman with short brown hair and an easy smile, wearing a simple work uniform with grease marks on one sleeve. She looked at my ship with genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. "First time meeting a Corvain pilot," she said cheerfully. "You're smaller than I expected. No offense." I did not know how to respond. Every instinct in my body told me I should be careful, that I should not trust the friendliness so easily. And yet, nothing about her behavior matched the warnings I had grown up hearing. She guided me through the station corridors, introducing me briefly to a few other crew members who greeted me with polite nods and curious glances, nothing more. No weapons were pointed at me. No guards surrounded me. It felt almost too calm, and that calmness unsettled me more than hostility would have. Eventually, Claire brought me to a small office where an older man sat behind a desk covered with data pads and half-finished cups of tea. He introduced himself as Daniel, a historian assigned to the outpost, responsible for handling first encounters like mine. "You crossed the boundary," Daniel said simply, not as an accusation, but as a fact. "Don't worry, it happens sometimes. Engine failures, storms, miscalculations. We're not going to punish you for an accident." "Then why does the boundary exist?" I asked, unable to hold back my curiosity any longer. Why do other species avoid this region so completely? I have never once seen a Corvain ship near this line, not even by mistake, until now. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying me with an expression I could not quite read. It was not amusement, and it was not pride. It looked almost like sadness. "That's actually a fair question," he said. "It's one we don't usually get to answer directly, since most species avoid asking it out loud. They just avoid the border instead." "But you will answer it?" I pressed. He glanced at Claire, who gave a small shrug, as if to say it was his choice to make. Daniel exhaled slowly and folded his hands together. "I can show you the records, if you want the truth instead of rumors," he said. "It's not a short answer. It's not something I can explain in one sentence. But if you're willing to listen, I'll walk you through it." I should have said no. Every part of my training told me to repair my ship, thank them politely, and leave as quickly as possible. Curiosity, however, has always been my greatest weakness, and in that moment, it overpowered caution completely. "I want to understand," I said. "I want to know why my people fear a boundary they cannot even explain." Daniel nodded slowly, as though he had expected that answer. He reached toward a panel on his desk and opened a data archive, one clearly marked with restricted access symbols I did not recognize. "This isn't restricted because it's dangerous to know," he explained. "It's restricted because most people who read it never look at humans the same way again. Once you understand why the boundary exists, you can't unknow it." I glanced at Claire, hoping to find some comfort in her expression, but she only offered a small, knowing smile, the kind someone gives when they already know what is about to unfold. "I still want to see it," I told Daniel. He turned his datapad toward me, revealing rows of old records, dates, and names I did not recognize yet. The first line of the file was simple, almost plain, yet something about it made the air in the room feel heavier. "Incident report. First contact conflict. Corvain assembly not involved." My hands tightened slightly on the edge of the desk. I realized then that whatever I was about to learn was not a myth invented to frighten children. It was history, carefully recorded, deliberately hidden from casual view, waiting only for someone curious enough, or foolish enough, to ask. Daniel looked at me one last time before opening the file completely. "Once we start," he said quietly, "there's no stopping halfway through. You will want answers to things you haven't even thought to ask yet." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry, and told him to continue. The file opened, and with it, a story began that would explain everything my people had never understood about the empty space surrounding a single, quiet species that no one dared to disturb. Daniel's fingers moved across the panel, and the office lights dimmed slightly as an old recording began to play. The date on the file was decades old, long before I was born, back when humans had only just begun expanding beyond their home system. Daniel spoke quietly, as the images loaded, his voice taking on the careful tone of someone repeating a story he had told many times before, yet still felt the weight of every time. Back then, nobody feared humans, he said. If anything, most species thought the opposite. Short lives, emotional decisions, small ships, and a habit of arguing among themselves in public. To outsiders, humans looked like an easy target, a young species that had not yet learned caution. The recording showed a quiet colony, a scattering of domed buildings on a rocky moon, modest and undefended, the kind of settlement built more for farming and research than for defense. Daniel explained that this colony belonged to one of the earliest human expansion projects, home to a few hundred civilians, engineers, and their families. A group calling themselves the Jurassic Combine decided this colony would make an easy prize, Daniel continued. They were not a large power, mostly scattered raiders and opportunists, who had learned to prey on new, unprotected settlements before real defenses could be built. They had done this to other species before, always with success. I watched the recording shift to grainy footage of unfamiliar ships descending toward the colony under the cover of a sensor blackout, moving with practiced confidence, clearly expecting no resistance. They assumed the colony had no military presence, Daniel said. They were partly right. There was no formal military station there, just civilians, engineers, teachers, farmers, families. Then, how did the humans respond? I asked, unable to hide the tension in my voice. Daniel paused the footage for a moment, glancing at me with an expression that seemed to weigh how much I was ready to hear. That's the part most species get wrong when they hear this story, he said. They expect me to say the military arrived just in time to save everyone. That's not what happened. The colonists did not wait for anyone to save them. He resumed the footage, and I watched as ordinary people, dressed in simple work clothes, moved with a kind of calm determination that did not match the panic I expected. There was no chaos, no scattering in fear. Instead, there was coordination, quiet instructions passed between neighbors, doors sealed, children moved to shelters, and adults gathering whatever tools and equipment they had on hand. These were not soldiers, Daniel said. They were engineers who understood their own machinery better than any invader ever could. They were farmers who knew every inch of their land. They used what they had, and what they had was enough. The footage did not show anything graphic, only distant shapes and shifting lights, but the outcome was clear from the reports that followed. The raiding force that had expected an easy, unguarded colony instead found themselves facing organized resistance from people who refused to be afraid, who worked together instantly, without waiting for permission or instruction from anyone above them. The Jurassic Combine lost more that day than they had lost in any previous raid on any other species, Daniel said. Not because the colonists had better weapons, they didn't, but because every single person on that colony refused to simply accept what was happening to them. They defended their home with everything available, and they did it together, immediately, without hesitation. I sat quietly, absorbing what I had just seen, trying to reconcile it with the calm, friendly people I had met since arriving at the station. Claire, standing near the doorway, had her arms crossed, watching my reaction carefully. That was only the beginning, Daniel said. News of the failed raid spread, but slowly, and only within certain circles. Most species dismissed it as luck, a single unusual event, nothing more. So a few months later, another group tried. The next recording showed a different location, a trading outpost this time, larger and busier than the farming colony, home to merchants, travelers, and a small human population working alongside a mix of other species. Daniel explained that this attempt was more organized, backed by a coalition hoping to test whether the first failure had truly been an accident. They planned carefully this time, Daniel said. Multiple ships, coordinated timing, a plan built specifically around what they believed were human weaknesses, emotional decision-making, lack of unified command, a tendency to argue rather than act. What went wrong for them? I asked quietly. Everything they assumed about humans turned out to be only half true, Daniel replied. Humans do argue, They do disagree, sometimes loudly, sometimes for a long time, but when a real threat appears, something changes. The arguing stops almost instantly. Something in how they are built allows disagreement to disappear the moment danger becomes real. The footage showed exactly that. Merchants who had been mid-conversation moments before immediately dropped their disagreements and began working together, directing each other with quick, efficient communication. There was no confusion, no wasted time debating who was in charge. People simply acted, trusting each other's judgment without needing formal orders. This confused the attackers more than anything else, Daniel said. They had prepared for chaos, expecting humans to scatter or argue among themselves under pressure. Instead, they found instant unity, and worse, creativity. Humans did not fight the way any previous species had fought. They improvised. They used ordinary tools in ways no one had predicted, adapted mid-conflict, and coordinated without any visible central command. I thought of my own people, the Corvain Assembly, where every decision required careful discussion, consensus building, and approval from multiple levels of authority before any action could be taken. The idea of instant, unified action without formal instruction felt almost impossible to imagine. After the second failed attempt, Daniel continued, word finally began to spread more seriously among the surrounding powers. Reports started circulating, cautious and uncertain at first, describing humans not as weak or emotional, but as unpredictable in a way that made them extremely difficult to plan against. He paused the recording again, letting the silence settle over the room before speaking further. "There is one more incident I want you to see," he said. "This one is the reason the boundary exists exactly where it does today." The next recording opened on a small trading vessel, far smaller than the colony or the outpost, drifting near what the records described as neutral space. Daniel explained that a group of individuals from a hostile faction had attempted something different this time. Instead of a direct assault, they tried infiltration, a quiet attempt to seize the vessel through deception, posing as friendly traders before revealing their true intentions once aboard. "This is the part most species find hardest to believe," Daniel said. "It wasn't a colony. It wasn't a military ship. It was a single civilian trading vessel, crewed by a handful of ordinary people. No weapons training, no formal defense preparation, just people going about their normal business." The footage showed a modest cargo hold, crates stacked along the walls, dim lighting, and a small crew going about routine tasks. When the infiltrators revealed themselves, expecting an easy takeover, something unexpected happened almost immediately. "They responded within seconds," Daniel said, "not with panic, not with confusion, with immediate, coordinated action, using whatever tools and equipment were closest at hand. No hesitation, no debate about what to do next." I watched the recording carefully, noting how quickly the ordinary crew members moved, communicating through short bursts of instruction, working together as if they had rehearsed this exact scenario 100 times before, even though the records clearly stated they had received no formal training of any kind. "The infiltrators had assumed civilians would be easy to control," Daniel said. "They discovered instead that ordinary humans, without any military background, could respond to a threat with the same speed and coordination as a trained unit." This incident became the turning point. It was the moment other species realized human behavior under pressure was not an exception limited to certain groups or locations. It appeared to be a consistent trait across the entire species. He closed the recording, and the room fell silent except for the faint hum of the station's ventilation system. I sat there, trying to process everything I had just witnessed: the calm efficiency, the instant unity, the complete absence of panic in situations that should have produced exactly that. "After these 3 incidents," Daniel said, "reports began circulating quietly among the surrounding powers. Not official warnings, not formal treaties, just cautious recommendations passed between traders and scouts. Avoid direct contact unless necessary. Do not test human settlements. Do not assume civilian populations are undefended simply because no military presence is visible." "That still does not explain everything," I said slowly. Weapons and coordination alone would not create the kind of boundary I have seen on every star chart since I was young. There must be something more. Daniel exchanged a brief glance with Claire before answering, and for the first time since we had met, I saw a flicker of hesitation in his expression, as though he was deciding how much more I was truly ready to understand. "You are right," he said quietly. "There is more. What you have seen so far only explains why other species learned to be cautious. It does not explain why they became afraid enough to avoid this region completely, even after all this time has passed." "Then tell me," I said, leaning forward despite the unease building steadily in my chest. "I want to understand all of it, not just part of it." Daniel nodded slowly, reaching once again toward his panel, preparing to open a deeper section of the archive, one that, judging by his expression, held something far more significant than anything I had witnessed so far. Daniel opened a new section of the archive, one filled not with individual incident reports, but with charts, summaries, and comparisons drawn from many different encounters across many years. This was not a single story anymore. This was a pattern, carefully studied and documented by analysts trying to understand something that clearly troubled them deeply. After the third incident became widely known, Daniel said, several neighboring powers began quietly collecting data on every recorded encounter involving humans, whether it ended peacefully or not. They wanted to know if what happened before was truly unusual, or if it was simply how humans always responded when faced with a threat. He tapped the panel, and a long list appeared, dozens of entries stretching across many years, each one summarized in only a few lines. I scanned the list quickly, noticing something strange almost immediately. "These are not all military encounters," I said. "Some of these involve trade disputes, research stations, even personal disagreements between individuals." "That's exactly what caught their attention," Daniel replied. "It wasn't only military situations that produced this pattern. Analysts found the same core behavior appearing again and again, regardless of the setting. A calm surface most of the time, followed by an instant, complete shift the moment something crossed into what humans considered a genuine threat." Claire, still standing near the doorway, spoke up quietly. "It's not that we're always ready for conflict," she said. "Most of us go through entire lives without ever needing to respond that way. But something in how we're built means that response is always available, sitting quietly in the background, waiting." I looked at her, trying to reconcile the calm, friendly woman standing before me with the pattern Daniel had just described. She did not appear dangerous in any way. She appeared exactly like what she was, a helpful engineer who had guided a stranded traveler safely to a repair station. "There is one report analysts return to more than any other," Daniel said, pulling up a specific entry from the list. "It became something of a case study among researchers trying to understand this pattern. I think it will help you see what I mean more clearly than numbers alone ever could." The entry described a human colony transport ship, a civilian vessel carrying families relocating between systems, unarmed and unescorted, similar in many ways to ordinary trade vessels I had encountered throughout my own travels. According to the report, the ship had been targeted by a group attempting to seize its cargo and passengers, believing correctly that no formal defense would be present. "There was no military training among anyone aboard that ship," Daniel said. "Just families, parents, children old enough to help, a retired teacher, a young mechanic named Ryan who had never held any kind of weapon in his life before that day." I felt a strange tightness settle in my chest as Daniel continued describing what the reports had documented. The response from the passengers had been immediate, coordinated without any prior planning, using ordinary tools and equipment found throughout the ship. What struck the original investigators most, according to Daniel, was not simply that the passengers defended themselves successfully. It was how naturally they adapted, how quickly ordinary people transformed unfamiliar objects into effective solutions, working together with an ease that suggested this capability had always been present within them, simply waiting for the right moment to appear. "The report used a phrase that stuck with researchers for years afterward," Daniel said. They called it recreational level competence, meaning these were not trained specialists. These were ordinary civilians who somehow responded with the same effectiveness as experienced professionals, despite having no formal preparation whatsoever. How is that possible? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. My people require years of specialized training before anyone is permitted to participate in any kind of defense operation. Even then, coordination during real danger is difficult and often flawed. Daniel considered the question carefully before answering. I think part of it comes from how humans grow up, he said. We play games as children that involve strategy, competition, quick thinking under pressure. We tell each other stories, generation after generation, about facing danger and overcoming it. It becomes part of how we think, long before any of us ever face real danger ourselves. But that alone would not explain everything, I said. Games and stories exist among other species as well. You're right, Daniel admitted. That's only part of it. The rest, I think, comes from something harder to explain in simple terms. A kind of stubbornness, maybe. A refusal to simply accept a bad situation as unchangeable. When something threatens someone we care about, or even something we've built with our own hands, most humans experience an immediate, powerful shift in focus. Fear becomes something else entirely, something closer to determination. I sat back slowly, trying to absorb everything Daniel had shown me so far. The colony that refused to be an easy target, the trading outpost that responded with instant unity despite constant disagreement under normal circumstances. The civilian ship that turned ordinary passengers into an effective, coordinated group within moments of genuine danger appearing. There is something else, Daniel said, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more careful. Something the reports mention repeatedly, something that seemed to unsettle analysts more than the actual outcomes of these incidents. What is it? I asked. It's the fact that humans do not forget, Daniel said quietly. Once a threat becomes real, once someone crosses that line, humans remember. Not with anger that fades over time, but with a kind of patient, quiet awareness that persists far longer than most species expect. Analysts noted that groups who attempted hostile actions against humans rarely tried again, not simply because they lost the initial encounter, but because something about the aftermath discouraged any future attempt entirely. I thought about my own people's history, filled with conflicts eventually forgotten, disputes settled and moved past within a generation or two. The idea of a species that remembered so clearly, so persistently, felt foreign in a way I struggled to fully grasp. This is why the boundary exists, Daniel continued. Not because humans announced it or demanded it through any formal treaty. It exists because every group who tested it eventually stopped and warned others quietly to do the same. Over time, caution became habit, and habit became the wide, empty boundary you crossed by accident earlier today. I looked toward Claire again, searching her expression for any sign of the intensity Daniel had just described. She only offered a small, understanding smile, the kind that suggested she had heard this exact reaction from others before me. I know it's a lot to take in, she said gently. Most people who learn this feel exactly like you do right now. Confused, a little unsettled, maybe even a bit afraid, even though nothing here has ever threatened you. I am not afraid of you, I said, though my own voice sounded less certain than I intended. That's good, Claire replied, because you shouldn't be. What Daniel just showed you explains why people avoid testing us. It doesn't explain who we actually are, day to day, when nothing threatening is happening at all. Daniel nodded in agreement, closing the archive slowly. If you really want to understand humans, he said, reading old reports about conflict will only take you so far. Numbers and incidents show you what happens under pressure. They don't show you who we are the rest of the time. Then how do I understand the rest? I asked. Daniel exchanged a brief glance with Claire, and something unspoken passed between them, an agreement reached without a single word exchanged. There's someone stationed here you should meet, Daniel said finally. Not a historian, not someone who studies incidents from behind a desk. Someone who has actually served, who has faced exactly the kind of situation we've been discussing, and who can tell you, in their own words, what it actually feels like from the inside. My chest tightened slightly at the suggestion, curiosity and unease mixing together in a way that made it difficult to speak for a moment. Despite everything I had just learned, some part of me still wanted to understand more, to see for myself whether the calm, ordinary people I had encountered so far truly matched the pattern described in every report Daniel had shown me. I would like that, I said finally, steadying my voice as best I could. I want to meet them. Claire smiled and moved toward the door. Then let's go find Owen, she said. He should be finishing his shift soon. Trust me, after everything you just learned, talking to him will change how you see all of this completely. We walked through several corridors before reaching a common area near the edge of the station, a wide room with large viewports looking out toward the stars, a few tables scattered across the floor, and the quiet hum of casual conversation drifting from a small group gathered near a food preparation counter. Claire led me toward a man sitting alone near one of the viewports, a mug of something warm resting in his hands, his attention fixed on the stars outside. "Owen," Claire called out cheerfully, "got someone here who wants to talk to you. Corvain Scout ended up crossing the boundary by accident earlier today." The man turned, and I found myself studying him carefully, searching for some visible sign of everything Daniel had just described. He looked ordinary, perhaps in his middle years, with short graying hair and a relaxed posture that suggested nothing urgent occupied his thoughts. When he smiled, it reached his eyes easily, warm and genuine, nothing like the cold, calculated expression I had unconsciously expected to find. "First time meeting one of you in person," Owen said, gesturing toward the empty seat across from him. "Sit, please. You look like you've had quite a day already." I sat carefully, still uncertain how to approach the conversation Daniel had promised would change my understanding completely. Owen studied me with polite curiosity, the same kind Claire had shown earlier, nothing threatening in his manner at all. "Daniel showed you the old reports, I'm guessing," Owen said, glancing briefly toward Claire, who nodded in confirmation. "That explains the look on your face. Everyone gets that look after reading through those files for the first time." "I do not know what to think anymore," I admitted honestly. "Everyone I have met since arriving here has been kind, patient, and welcoming. Yet the records Daniel showed me describe something entirely different, something far more unsettling." Owen took a slow sip from his mug before responding, considering his words carefully. "I understand why that feels confusing," he said, "but it isn't really a contradiction, once you understand how it actually works. Most of us live our entire lives exactly the way you've experienced since arriving here. Calm, friendly, perfectly ordinary. That's genuinely who we are, most of the time." "Then why do those old reports describe something so different?" I asked. "Because there's a difference between how we normally live and what we're capable of if something we truly care about is threatened," Owen said. "I served for many years before coming here. I've seen situations firsthand that matched exactly what Daniel probably showed you. And I can tell you honestly, none of us wake up every day thinking about conflict. We think about our families, our work, our small daily routines, exactly like anyone else. But when something changes," I said slowly, "when danger becomes real, something shifts almost instantly." Owen nodded, his expression growing slightly more serious, though his tone remained calm and steady. "That's right," he said. "I remember an assignment years ago, protecting a small research outpost near a contested border. Nothing dramatic happened for months. We ran routine checks, helped researchers with equipment, spent evenings talking about our families back home. Completely ordinary." He paused, glancing briefly out toward the stars before continuing. "Then one day, a group attempted to seize control of the outpost, believing our presence there was purely symbolic, nothing more than a formality. I remember exactly how quickly everything changed. One moment, I was helping a researcher named Grace repair a faulty sensor array. The next, every single person on that outpost moved with complete focus, coordinating instantly, without needing anyone to explain what to do. Even the researchers? I asked. The people with no formal defense training? Especially the researchers, Owen said. Grace, in particular, surprised everyone that day, including herself, I think. She had spent years studying atmospheric patterns, nothing related to conflict at all. Yet when the situation became real, she moved with the same calm focus as anyone trained specifically for that purpose. I thought back to Daniel's earlier explanation, the strange consistency across every recorded incident, regardless of location or circumstance. Hearing it described firsthand, by someone who had actually lived through it, made the pattern feel far more real than any archived report could have. Does it frighten you? I asked quietly, knowing that shift exists within yourself, waiting for the right moment to appear. Owen considered the question for a long moment before answering. I used to think about that a lot, especially early in my service, he said. But over time, I came to see it differently. It's not something separate from who I am. It's part of me, the same way patience is part of me, or curiosity, or the simple enjoyment I find in a quiet evening like this one. How can something so calm and something so intense exist together, within the same person? I asked, unable to fully hide the confusion in my voice. Owen smiled slightly, setting his mug down on the table between us. I think that's actually the part outsiders struggle with most, he said. You're looking for some hidden switch, some separate mode that activates only under pressure. But it isn't like that at all. It's more like a single continuous thing, stretching from complete calm all the way to complete focus, depending entirely on what the moment requires. A single continuous thing, I repeated slowly, trying to understand. Think of it like this, Owen said. If someone threatens something I genuinely care about, whether that's a person, a home, or simply the safety of people around me, I don't become a different person. I simply move further along something that was always there to begin with. The friendliness you've experienced since arriving here, and the response described in those old reports, come from exactly the same place inside us. I sat quietly for a moment, letting his words settle. Something about the simplicity of his explanation unsettled me more than any dramatic description could have. It suggested that everyone I had met since arriving, Claire, Daniel, and now Owen himself, carried this same continuous capability within them, hidden beneath ordinary kindness, waiting patiently for a moment that, for most of them, might never actually come. Does everyone feel this way? I asked. Every human, regardless of where they live or what work they do? Not identically, Owen admitted. People differ, just like any species. Some feel it more strongly than others, but the core pattern seems remarkably consistent, based on everything I've seen and everything I've read from others who study this more formally than I do. Claire, who had remained quietly listening throughout the conversation, finally spoke again. I think what surprises outsiders most, she said, is that we don't see this as something extraordinary. To us, it just feels normal. We don't walk around constantly aware of it. We live our lives, we build things, we help each other, exactly like you've seen since you arrived. This part of us simply exists quietly in the background, mostly forgotten until it's needed. And when it is needed, I said slowly, there is no hesitation. Very little from what I've witnessed, Owen agreed. Not because we're trained to eliminate hesitation entirely, but because caring deeply about something tends to clear away uncertainty almost instantly. When Grace moved to help defend that outpost, she wasn't thinking about training or procedure. She was thinking about the people around her, people she had grown close to over months of ordinary, quiet work. I found myself studying Owen more closely, searching for some outward sign of the intensity he had just described, some hint of the transformation Daniel's records had documented so consistently. Yet all I saw was an ordinary man, relaxed and unhurried, sharing a quiet moment near a viewport overlooking the stars. I think, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, this frightens me more than anything else I have learned today. Not because you seem dangerous, because you do not seem dangerous at all, and yet everything Daniel showed me proves otherwise. Owen nodded, understanding immediately what I meant. That's probably the most accurate way to describe how most species feel once they truly understand us, he said. It's not fear of an obvious threat. It's a different kind of unease, realizing that ordinary kindness and genuine capability can exist together in the exact same person without contradiction. How do you live with that awareness? I asked. Knowing what you are capable of, while still choosing, every single day, to remain calm and welcoming toward strangers like myself. Owen smiled gently, glancing briefly toward Claire before answering. I think that's actually the most important part of who we are, he said. The capability exists, yes, but so does the choice. Every single day, every single interaction, we choose kindness first. Not because we're incapable of anything else, but because we understand, better than most, exactly what the alternative would mean. His words settled over me slowly, quietly reshaping everything I thought I had understood about humans since first crossing the boundary earlier that day. I had expected, somewhere deep within my instincts, to eventually uncover something clearly threatening, some obvious explanation for why an entire region of space remained deliberately empty around this single, unassuming species. Instead, I found something far more difficult to categorize. Ordinary people, living ordinary lives, carrying within them a quiet, continuous capability they rarely needed to use, choosing gentleness and cooperation as their default response to nearly everything around them, while remaining fully capable of something else entirely, should the situation ever demand it. I think I understand now, I said quietly, why the boundary exists the way it does. It was never really about fear of your weapons, or your ships, or your technology. No, Owen agreed softly. It never was. It was about not knowing where the line exists within each of you, I continued slowly, and understanding that once someone crosses it, there is no predicting exactly how far that response might extend. Owen said nothing, simply nodding once, allowing the silence to confirm what words alone could not fully express. Claire remained quiet as well, watching me with an expression that suggested she had witnessed this exact realization settle over other visitors many times before. I sat there for a long moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of ordinary conversation drifting from the food counter nearby, the soft light of distant stars filtering through the viewport, and the calm, unhurried presence of two people who, according to everything I had learned that day, represented an entire species capable of far more than their gentle exterior ever suggested. I did not expect to witness the truth of Owen's words so soon, but the universe, it seemed, had other plans. We had barely finished our conversation when a sharp tone echoed across the station, different from any alert I had heard so far, low and steady, the kind of sound designed to draw immediate attention without causing outright alarm. Claire's expression shifted instantly, though her voice remained calm as she rose from her seat. "That's a proximity alert," she said. "Something's approaching the station that wasn't scheduled." Owen stood as well, unhurried, though I noticed his attention had sharpened considerably, his relaxed posture replaced by quiet readiness. "Let's take a look," he said simply, gesturing toward a nearby viewport terminal. I followed them, my chest tightening with an unease I could not fully explain. On the terminal screen, several unfamiliar ships had appeared at the edge of the station's sensor range, moving with a formation I recognized immediately. My chest went cold as the markings became clearer. "Those are Corvain vessels," I said quietly, disbelief creeping into my voice. "Assembly patrol ships. Why would they be here?" Daniel, who had joined us moments earlier, studied the readings carefully. "Looks like they picked up your ship's earlier distress signal before the boundary interference cut off transmission," he said. "They probably assumed something happened to you." My stomach twisted uncomfortably. I understood immediately what this meant. My people, cautious and rule-bound as they were, would not send a rescue mission casually. If they believed one of their scouts had been captured or harmed within human territory, their response would be formal, tense, and potentially dangerous for everyone involved. "They will demand my immediate return," I said, "and they will likely assume the worst about why I have not already reported back." Claire exchanged a quick glance with Owen, both of them remarkably composed given the situation unfolding before us. "Then let's make sure they get accurate information instead of assumptions," Owen said calmly. "No need for anything to escalate over a simple misunderstanding." We moved quickly toward the station's communication center, a compact room filled with quiet, focused activity as several crew members prepared for contact. I stood nervously near the entrance, watching as Daniel opened a channel toward the approaching Corvain vessels. The response came quickly, sharp and formal, exactly as I expected. A voice I recognized immediately as Commander Iska Vel, a senior officer known throughout the assembly for her rigid adherence to protocol, filled the room with unmistakable authority. "This is Commander Vel, of the Corvain Assembly. You are holding one of our scouts without authorization. Release Elu Vantor immediately, or we will consider this a hostile action." I felt my pulse quicken, uncertain how the humans around me would respond to such a direct, forceful demand. To my surprise, Daniel's expression remained entirely calm, almost gentle, as he replied, "Commander Vel, this is Daniel Ashworth, Station Liaison. Your scout suffered an engine failure and drifted into our territory by accident. We provided repair assistance and hospitality. Elu is here voluntarily and is welcome to leave whenever they choose. There's no need for any hostility here." There was a tense pause before Commander Vel responded again, her tone slightly less rigid, though still cautious. "We require visual confirmation that our scout remains unharmed, immediately." "Of course," Daniel said easily, gesturing toward me with a reassuring nod. I stepped forward, my voice trembling slightly as I addressed my own commander. "Commander Vel, I am unharmed. My engine failed during patrol, and I crossed the boundary unintentionally. These people have shown me nothing but kindness since my arrival." Silence followed my words, stretching long enough that I began to worry my explanation had not been enough to calm the situation. Then Commander Vel's voice returned, still cautious, though noticeably less tense than before. "Understood. We will send a single vessel to retrieve our scout. No further action is necessary, provided there are no complications." "There won't be," Owen said calmly, stepping into view beside Daniel. "We're happy to assist however we can to make this transition smooth." The channel closed and the room fell into a brief, uneasy silence. I turned toward Owen, still shaken by how close the situation had felt to spiraling into something far more serious. "That could have gone very differently," I said quietly. "If your response had matched her tone, if anyone here had reacted with equal rigidity or suspicion, this situation might have escalated into something neither of our peoples could easily undo." Owen nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's exactly the point," he said. "We understand exactly how quickly things can become serious. That understanding is precisely why we choose calm first, every single time it's possible. Not because we're incapable of a stronger response, but because we know firsthand what that stronger response actually means, and we would always rather avoid it entirely." I stood there, absorbing his words fully for the first time, understanding finally what Daniel, Claire, and Owen had each been trying to show me throughout the entire day. It was not simply that humans possessed a hidden capability for intense action when threatened. It was that they understood this capability so deeply, so thoroughly, that they actively chose to avoid triggering it whenever any peaceful alternative remained available. A single Corvain shuttle arrived shortly afterward, small and unarmed, clearly meant only for retrieval rather than confrontation. Claire walked with me toward the docking bay, her earlier cheerful energy tempered slightly by the seriousness of what had just occurred, though her warmth remained entirely genuine. "I hope this hasn't scared you away from ever visiting again," she said, a small smile returning to her expression. "I do not think I could stay away, even if I wanted to," I admitted honestly. "Everything I have learned today has changed how I understand your entire species completely." Daniel joined us as we approached the bay, offering a final piece of advice before my departure. "When you report back to your people," he said, "tell them exactly what you saw here today. Not just the old records, but what you witnessed with your own eyes. Kindness offered freely, capability held quietly in reserve, and a clear preference for calm over conflict, even when tension arrives unexpectedly. I nodded slowly, understanding the importance of his request. I will tell them everything, I promised. I believe they need to understand this as clearly as I finally do. Owen extended his hand toward me in a gesture I had seen humans use before, though I had never fully understood its meaning until that moment. I copied the motion carefully, and he shook my hand firmly, his expression warm and sincere. "Travel safely, Elu," he said. "I hope the next time you cross paths with humans, it's under calmer circumstances than today." "As do I," I replied, meaning it fully for the first time since my ship had first drifted across that invisible boundary. I boarded the small Corvain shuttle, settling into my seat as the station slowly grew smaller behind me through the viewport. My commander's stern expression greeted me the moment I stepped aboard, though her tension eased slightly upon confirming, through careful inspection, that I had indeed suffered no harm during my time among the humans. "You will provide a full report immediately upon our return," Commander Vell said firmly, though I noticed a flicker of genuine curiosity beneath her formal tone. "I intend to," I replied. "There is much you need to understand, Commander, more than any previous report has ever fully explained." The journey back to Assembly territory passed quietly, giving me ample time to organize my thoughts before facing the formal debrief that awaited me. I spent much of that time reflecting on everything Daniel, Claire, and Owen had shown me, piecing together a picture far more complete than any fragmented rumor or cautious warning ever could have provided. When I finally stood before the Assembly Council, presenting my findings alongside the archived records Daniel had generously permitted me to bring, I watched carefully as understanding slowly settled across each unfamiliar face in the room. I explained the old incidents first, the colony that refused to be an easy target, the trading outpost that abandoned disagreement instantly when real danger appeared, the civilian ship whose untrained passengers responded with a level of coordination that matched trained specialists. Then I explained what mattered most, the part that no old record could have shown me nearly as clearly as witnessing it firsthand. I described Owen's calm explanation of a single continuous capability, stretching seamlessly from gentle kindness to intense focus, dependent entirely on what any given moment required. I described the tense standoff that had unfolded only hours earlier, and how deliberately, how consistently, every human involved had chosen calm words and patient explanation over rigid confrontation, even while fully capable of responding with far greater intensity had the situation demanded it. "The boundary exists," I told the Council, "not because humans are simply dangerous, though the old records certainly prove they can be, when truly provoked. The boundary exists because they understand their own capability so completely that they choose, deliberately and consistently, to avoid using it whenever any peaceful path remains open to them." A long silence followed my explanation, the Council members exchanging quiet glances, clearly absorbing the weight of what I had just described. Finally, an elder Council member, known throughout the Assembly for his careful, measured judgment, spoke slowly. "You are suggesting," he said, "that the very restraint we have always interpreted as evidence of weakness is, in truth, evidence of an entirely different kind of strength." "Yes," I said simply. "Their kindness is not the absence of capability. It is the presence of choice, exercised deliberately, every single day, toward nearly everyone they encounter." That quiet. The Council remained quiet for a long moment, considering the full implications of what I had presented. Eventually, discussions began regarding revised protocols for any future encounters near human territory, emphasizing caution paired with genuine respect, rather than the vague, poorly understood fear that had shaped Assembly policy for generations. In the months that followed, I found myself assigned permanently to human diplomatic relations, a role I accepted eagerly, eager to continue learning everything I could about a species that had so thoroughly reshaped my understanding of strength, restraint, and quiet capability. I returned to that same station many times afterward, sharing meals with Claire, listening to Daniel's careful historical explanations, and occasionally sitting quietly beside Owen near that same viewport, watching the stars together in comfortable silence. During one such visit, months after our first meeting, I witnessed another tense situation unfold, this time involving a different species entirely, unfamiliar with human territory and unaware of the careful history I now understood so completely. A minor dispute over trade routes had escalated unexpectedly, voices rising sharply across an open communication channel, tension building rapidly towards something that could have easily become serious. I watched as Owen, now familiar to me as a calm, steady presence rather than a mystery to be feared, stepped into the conversation with practiced ease. He listened patiently, acknowledged each concern raised by the unfamiliar species with genuine respect, and gradually, through calm words and gentle humor, guided the entire situation toward a peaceful resolution that left both sides satisfied. Afterward, as the tension finally dissolved into relieved laughter, shared across the same channel that had moments earlier carried sharp, angry words, I found myself reflecting once again on everything I had learned since that very first accidental crossing. The galaxy, I realized, was not safe from humans because some external force controlled or restrained them. It was safe because humans themselves, individually and collectively, chose peace deliberately, again and again, every single day, fully aware of the alternative available to them, yet consistently choosing kindness instead. That realization, more than any old record or archived incident report ever could, remained with me long after that day. It was not the quiet capability itself that unsettled me most, though I understood now exactly why other species avoided testing it so carefully. It was the deliberate, consistent choice to set that capability aside, replaced instead by patience, humor, and genuine warmth, extended freely towards strangers, who, like myself, had once believed humans were simply another species to be cautiously studied from a careful, comfortable distance. I understood now why the boundary existed exactly where it did, drawn quietly across star charts by species who had learned, through hard experience, exactly how far humans could be pushed before that quiet capability rose fully to the surface. But I also understood something the old records had never fully captured, something only careful, patient observation could reveal. Humans were never dangerous simply because of what they could do. They were remarkable because of what they consistently chose not to do every single day, toward nearly everyone they encountered, including strangers who arrived, frightened and uncertain, drifting accidentally across a boundary they had never truly understood until that very moment.